City infrastructure, and I use that word broadly, underpins Madison's high quality of life and our strong economy. In fact, our economy is so strong and our population growth is so robust that we are driving both the economic growth and the population growth of the state of Wisconsin. When I talk about infrastructure, yes, I mean the streets, I mean the pipes underneath the streets, and the traditional infrastructure that we think about. But I also mean our parks and our libraries, our public art, our transit system, our traffic lights, the rapid flashing beacons. I could go on and on. There's a lot of infrastructure that the City of Madison is responsible for. And collectively, that infrastructure supports our mobility, it keeps us safe, it keeps our environment clean, our neighborhoods healthy, and our economy humming. That's what my capital budget delivers. In a typical year, when I would present a capital budget, I would be sharing highlights of the investments that we're most excited about in the budget. I'll do a little bit of that this year, but this is not your typical year. This is a year where the structural deficit that is in the operating budget and the upcoming referendum are overshadowing our capital investments. And so I want to talk about the relationship between the capital budget and the operating budget, and how we make careful choices in the capital budget to minimize future operation costs and burdens on the taxpayers. Let me just give you a few budget basics, just in case folks aren't up to speed. The capital budget pays for buildings, traditional infrastructure, and other projects, things. The operating budget pays for staff, services, and programs. The money for capital projects is often funded by general obligation borrowing, by TIF dollars, by utility dollars, or by grants. And I want to mention here that we've been incredibly successful with getting grants, mostly from the federal government, but some from the state as well. Since 2020, we have secured $563.9 million in federal and state funds for city projects. That's capital funding. The major sources of revenue for the operating budget are property taxes, state revenues, including shared revenue, and other smaller sources of revenue like fees and special charges. There's a few things that I think it's important for folks to know. Funding from the capital budget cannot be transferred to the operating budget. Capital funds are for capital investments and not for salaries and staffing and everyday projects and services. So we could not make up the gap in the operating budget just by not building a new street or a new fire station or a new facility. That's not how it works. And the structural deficit that we face in the operating budget is because of the unrealistic restrictions that are placed on Wisconsin cities by the state legislature. These restrictions don't account for inflation, and they barely account for new growth in our city. So every year, the cost of doing business here in the city of Madison increase more than the state legislature will let us increase our revenues. Every single year since Scott Walker became governor. It's really that simple. And after more than a decade of finding ways to patch that over, in a fast-growing city, it's no longer tenable for us to pretend that our staff can keep doing more with less. The point being, the capital budget, which is managed with fewer state restrictions, does not face problems and is healthy because we have consistently, over many years, demonstrated responsible budgeting. One example of that responsibility is to show how much debt we carry to pay for capital projects. Since 2019, debt service as a share of the operating budget has remained steady and it is slightly lower in 2024. Another example, Madison has a AAA bond rating, which allows us to borrow money at very low interest rates, which saves us money in the long run on our capital projects. And this year, our capital budget is $12.4 million smaller than last year. And the 6-year capital improvement program total is also lower than last year's capital improvement program. This will help to reduce the impact of debt service on the taxpayers. We also keep a really sharp eye on how our capital budget can create operating budget efficiencies while we plan to serve our growing city. I'm going to give you a couple examples of that. You actually may have read about one in the news, and that is that when we use grant funds to buy new elections machinery that will allow us to save money on salaries for poll workers going forward. So we used a capital expense to reduce our operating expenses going forward. Another example of that is in the capital improvement plan is a plan to build a new public works facility on the far west side. This is needed because every year our staff spend hundreds of hours hauling heavy equipment and vehicles from centrally located facilities over to the far west side to do work in that part of town. Building a west side facility will save valuable time, about $500,000 in fuel costs every year, and it will address our need for more space to do this work as our city grows. We're also looking to centralize and expand the police property and evidence storage facility. This is something that's been in the capital improvement plan, and it is going to add critically needed space. We have some pretty stringent requirements on how long we need to keep evidence, and so we need space for that. It will also keep staff and the public from having to travel to multiple sites around the city to access that evidence. And we're planning to co-locate our South District Police Station, allowing even more staffing and operational efficiencies. Again, making a capital investment to save money in our operating budget. Another example is upcoming construction on Regent Street, where we have an immediate need to make stormwater improvements. But while we're making those stormwater improvements, we're also going to take advantage of the fact that we're doing construction and upgrade all of the aging infrastructure under Regent Street. This improves our efficiency and reduces costs in the long run because we only have to dig once. It will also have the benefit of easing the burden of construction on neighborhood residents and businesses. Of course, we know we also need to grow as our population grows. And we need to make sure that we have the infrastructure to support that. So there's a number of things in the capital improvement plan that do that. Just one example, we're expanding Pleasant View Road on the west side to meet the demands of our growing city. Our infrastructure forms the foundation of all of the spaces that we use every day in Madison, whether to live, work, play, study, shop, whatever we might be doing. It underpins our economy, our health and safety, and our generally high quality of life that we have here in Madison. We can never fund everything that everybody has asked for or all the projects that we would like to do. And I had to make some hard choices about what to prioritize in this capital budget. But this budget continues to deliver on the foundational underpinning of city services, continues to deliver strong infrastructure, and it continues to deliver sound fiscal management. Thank you all for being here, and I'd be happy to take a few questions, if there are any. So there's sort of two categories of things that we would have liked to include that we chose not to this year. One category is projects that agencies had proposed that we thought were unrealistic in the time frame, and so we have moved them out into future years. One project that's been sort of on the docket for a long time is looking at a new location, for example, for a North Side police station. That's still sort of out there, and we're exploring the possibilities, but it's not something that gets added to the capital budget for this year because it's not quite ready yet, and we wouldn't have the capacity to deliver it even if it was. So there's a number of things that we're just really trying to pay attention to our staff capacity. And again, going back to the fact that staff is in the operating budget, and I think you all know this, but it bears repeating that if our staffing levels had kept pace with population growth, we'd have 217 more staff working for the City of Madison. So our existing staff only have so much capacity to deliver projects, and so there's a number of projects that we've had to delay because of it. And then there's a few others that I just didn't think were ripe to include at this point in time. And so we'll keep those ideas out there, and we'll see if the situation improves in the future where we can support more infrastructure. Allie had a question, then I'll come over here. That's a great question. I don't have off the top of my head what the biggest items are, but no, they aren't the ones that I mentioned. I'm focusing really on where we can find efficiencies in our operating budget. In general, the largest sections of the capital budget are street infrastructure and engineering projects. Yeah, so the decision to try and really constrain our capital budget spending this year is because while the capital budget doesn't impact the levy limit and how much we can raise in property taxes, it does impact taxpayers through debt service. And so I thought it was very important for us to make a real effort to lower the impact of debt service on taxpayers in the long term. And I also thought it was really important for us to be realistic about how much we can accomplish with the staffing levels that we have. So I hope that people understand that we are scrutinizing literally every line of our budget and making hard decisions about whether things can go forward or not, both because we are really mindful of the impact on household budgets, but also because we just really want to be realistic about what we can do with the number of staff that we have. And I don't think that there are any particularly controversial projects. I mean, the council may have a different answer to that question, but I do expect that there are some projects that folks want to see done that may have been pushed off a couple of years or delayed that some members of the council might want to try and bring forward again. That's a conversation that we'll have in the Finance Committee and then again in November at Council. I always welcome input from the council, and in fact, in the process of putting together the capital budget, I did have conversations with alders. I invited every alder to share their priorities with me so we could consider them in terms of what we went into the executive budget. So I really look forward to the conversation with the council and seeing if they have other priorities that they'd like to shift things in or out of my executive budget. Any other questions? No new updates, but the north-south BRT line is in planning right now. It is reflected in the capital budget, and it's our hope that we'll continue to get a green light from the federal government. This is not a project that goes forward without federal funding, so it's my hope that we are doing the work that we need to do to apply for that federal funding. And hopefully that will materialize and we'll be able to continue the project. But that's really where we're at right now, is in the planning phases. Yep. So I think one thing that folks should know about the city's budgeting process is it's incredibly transparent. There is a lot of budget information on the Finance Department's webpage, and I encourage people to look at it. You will see there all of the agency requests, what the agencies asked for in the capital budget. Now you will see what I have decided to put into my executive budget, and as we move forward through the process, you'll see amendments that the City Council might make and how they were decided either in favor or against. So people can really go as deep as they want into our budgeting process. If you don't want to totally geek out on it, I would say to focus on some of the top lines. So the finance staff puts together a great sort of executive summary that will go over the top lines of the capital budget. That's the place to start for folks. And then the next thing I would look at is, is there a particular type of infrastructure you care about? Do you care about park improvements, for example? Jump right to the park section and just look at the projects there. So that would be the approach that I would take if folks are brand new to the budget. On the operating budget, obviously it's a different situation, and I think the really important things for people to understand are the dynamics between our operating budget and state restrictions. And that's something that we'll continue to be talking about throughout the fall. But if people want to start with a primer, we are, I hope, hours, if not days away from putting up a specific website about the referendum. And in the meantime, there is a portion of the finance website that people can look at. So cityofmadison.com/budget, I believe, will get you there, and you can click through and learn about the operating budget and all the dynamics there. And I really encourage people to engage with the city budget process, encourage people to learn the facts, to get good information. If they have questions, we have an event coming up tomorrow night at 5:30. It's an Ask Me Anything, and so you can hop onto the Zoom. You can literally ask any question you have about the budget, and city staff will answer it for you. And it's a great place for people to get good, solid information about what's really happening. So, all right, with that, thank you all very much for being here. I appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day.